Welcome to Conversations. I'm your host, Charles Kirkland Jr., and my favorite time of the month is here when I get to speak with one of the wonderful filmmakers in our community who are doing great things. Today, I have with me an award-winning screenwriter and director who is an advocate for deaf representation, and we'll ask him why that is later in the show. His film last year, 2023, called Millstone, won the Grand Jury Prize at the Slam Dance Film Festival and has gone on to play around the world. He works both in fiction and documentary, and his short documentary, My Brother is Deaf, qualified for an Academy Award consideration in 2023. His films are screened at the National Gallery of Art, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and like festivals, like I said, Slam Dance, Festival Regard. He's been in Vancouver, Calgary, Cleveland, all over the place. And so today I am thankful that I can say that the filmmaker of the month for the month of February is Peter Hoffman Kimball. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to talk with you, Charles, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's great. It's great for you to be here. And the first question I ask for everyone who comes on on this show in this situation is, what does it feel like? What do you think about when you're named the filmmaker of the month for the month of February 2024?
Well, it's a big honor. I'm so happy to be making films and working here in DC and DC area, and knowing just all the creative people that are here, all the different people who are doing really impressive things. It's great just to be mentioned among them. So it's a big honor for me.
Well, congratulations. I think it's well deserved, and especially since you had a wonderful film called Millstone, which was at Slam Dance last year, part of their I forget what the name of the it's overcoming. What is I forget the
Unstoppable.
Unstoppable. That's right, the Unstoppable series that they have at Slam Dance. This year, I saw it last year at Slam Dance, and then there was a wonderful film called The Room this year. I think Slam Dance does a wonderful job of focusing on films of people overcoming, and so Millstone was about a person who's deaf, and you are an advocate for deaf representation. Um, can you talk about why and what that means for you?
Yeah. So I'm not deaf myself, but my son is deaf, profoundly deaf in both ears. So he's a young child right now. But this is something that ever since we discovered that he was deaf, it's changed my life. Thinking about what it means to be deaf, thinking about what opportunities there are, what difficulties there are, but also thinking specifically in film about where the representation is. And so that's something that's been really important to me, working with deaf actors, deaf producers and collaborators, and doing things both that are sort of deaf themed. Some of my documentary work is specifically about some famous deaf people or deaf experience. But then a lot of my fiction work isn't necessarily about being deaf at all. That's not my experience, but it's something where having deaf actors play roles that, you might not necessarily think it had to be a deaf actor for that role, but thinking of the opportunities where deaf actors can play a part, where they can use sign language in a film and have that represented on screen. And so that's something that I'm trying to do as much as I can in my own work.
Okay. What is it like to create these works where you're using deaf actors, or I mean, do you have deaf writers? I mean, because like you said, it's not totally your experience. So how do you touch into what they're do you take input from the people you're working with? How do you come across these stories? How do you develop them?
Well, it's a great question. And so, for instance, with my film Millstone, it has nothing to do with being deaf. It is just sort of a human story. It's a dark, twisty, turny story, but it's just a human story where the characters happen to be deaf. And so I wrote that I wrote that in English, but working with the actors, so the actors, it's 3 actors in that film, and they're all deaf. And then working with an ASL consultant on set who could help me be able to, I was paying attention to the performances, but he was paying attention to specifically the signs they were using and whether that was coming across well. I've also worked with ASL consultants, and that's American Sign Language, at different stages of production, where taking my English language script and actually writing out what signs you would use to translate that into sign language. So, as a writer, I'm starting with my native language, which is English, but then working with people to actually recognize that English and sign language are not the same language. It's not
Right.
just a signed version of English, it's its own language. And so working with a professional translator to actually turn my script into a script that works in ASL, it's a challenge, but it's something that I think is a really interesting, both in terms of increasing representation of performers and collaborators and producers, but also just creatively, it's not something that we see that much of. And so that's really interesting to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like the fact that you're not making films about deaf people. You're making films that just include deaf people, and it's just a regular life story with people who happen to have who use sign language instead of words. So I think that's a beautiful way of just expressing what life is just normally.
Absolutely, and I think you said it really well. That's what I am really interested in doing, and I think that fits with my strengths and my experiences. I don't want to pretend to tell a story of someone going through life as a deaf person, because that's not, I can't speak as authentically to that. But the idea that a person who's deaf might also have the same kind of experiences that anybody else has, and that I can speak to those human experiences, that's really interesting to me.
Okay. Let's talk about your latest feature that is coming out or is out now. It's called "I'll Sleep When You're Dead," and it's a admittedly dark comedy that's shot entirely in American Sign Language, meaning that there's no little speaking. It's all sign language. What was it like to create this film? Was it and I know it's a short, but how difficult was it, or how different was it in making it totally in sign language than anything you've done before?
Yeah, well, I'll sleep when you're dead. It's actually a feature film, so it's almost 2 hours long. It's a full length film, and it was quite a challenge. There are a lot of challenges that come along with any level of independent filmmaking, and then added to that, working in a language that's not my native language, and there are a lot of challenges there. But it came down to me putting a cast together. I worked with a great producer, Gary Brooks, who's based here in the DC area, and he's deaf, and he really helped put the film together in terms of giving a lot of guidance, and in finding actors who could really play the parts and bring their personality to those characters. So it's about 12 different characters,
Yeah.
who are all fluent signers. Almost all of them are deaf themselves, or I think there's one person in the cast who's coda, so he's the child of deaf parents. But nobody learned sign language for this project. It was all something that they came into this knowing, and is a language that they use regularly. And this is again it's a film. It's just sort of it's a revenge comedy about the sort of a man out to get revenge for a tragedy has befallen him. He's out to get revenge, but he's the least intimidating person in the world. So, what do you do if you want revenge, but you've never done anything violent, never broken any rules in your life? How do you go about that? And so it's kind of a fun premise that goes to interesting places, but I just made the creative choice to work with deaf actors, and doing that all in sign language.
Okay, so um how can someone see this film now that it's done, finished, put out? And thank you for correcting me. I knew it was a feature film. I think question I was asking was, how is it different creating this film versus the shorts that you have done in the past?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll let me just address that really quick because there is something. This is my first time making a feature film, and it's a trial and error, baptism by fire. But there are a lot of things where you can focus on getting the angle exactly perfect, the lighting perfect when you're doing a short film, when you have a short amount of scenes or shots that you have to do. When you're doing a full feature, you've got a limited budget, limited time. It's some more limitations to actually making it work. I think the film is great, but there are some interesting challenges to make that all work on a longer project. But so this film, it's available to rent on Amazon, which people don't always love renting a video anymore. But it actually, I'm working with a new company that is it's they're just launching a new streaming service that's VSign Plus, VSYNPLUS.com. That's but this is a streaming service that is exclusively sign language content. So for people who are deaf, for people who are interested in learning sign language, for people who are interested in seeing films that they just never otherwise would see. And so my film, and I think all the films or most of the films, they're in sign language, but with, of course, subtitles so that you can follow along in English, just like you would a foreign language film.
Right, right. I mean, typically, I mean, it's American Sign Language, but it is another language, and so yeah, you need closed captioning works.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So on Amazon Prime, vsignplus.com as a streaming service.
That's a new streaming service, and I mean, it's great content on there, and it's not something maybe everybody would stumble across, but I think if you're interested in sign language, or interested in seeing some films that you otherwise would never run across, I think it's a great service.
Well, just I've taken sign language classes in the past, and I know some things, but it's one of those, like any other language. If you don't keep up with it, you can lose the abilities. And so I think this will be an interesting channel to watch, is just to refresh my some of my sign language abilities.
Absolutely, I think that's a great idea.
All right, so I have this question that we had a Super Bowl a couple of weeks ago, and as the national anthem was coming, and they introduced this sign language interpreter for the anthems, and I think the other songs that were happening at the beginning, and Marley Matlin criticized the televised broadcast of the national anthems, because after they introduced them, we never saw the sign language people again. Um, do you have what are your feelings on the fact that you have sign language interpreters, but you don't put them on the screen?
I think it's really sad, and I think ill thought out. The interpreter was actually an actor, Daniel Durant, who he was in the film Coda, and he's the star of my film Millstone. So I know him, and he's a great performer, and I think in his performance of the anthem just did an amazing job. But I think it's really sad that they didn't show him more. And I understand there are a lot of things they're trying to show, and they're. But if you go back and look at that broadcast, maybe you can defend the choice to not have him constantly on the screen, but the fact that they never come back to him, even when they're getting random shots of people in the crowd, and again and again with different people. I understand you get a shot of Taylor Swift, you get a shot of Reba McEntire singing. I understand that, but to never come back to him just seemed really unfortunate.
I think at least they could have had the little box in the corner at the bottom where you see the person doing the signs. It might have been shrunken a little, but at least it would have been there to see, and for those who are hearing impaired would be able to enjoy that as well.
Absolutely, and that's you know, if you're relying on sign language for language, you really need to see it.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing it, you're not getting it. So that's you know, unfortunate. I think there are a couple different ways they could have handled it, and I don't think they chose the best way.
Yeah, they need a they need a advocate like you to step up and say, "Hey, this is what you need to do."
Well, you know, I think deaf people are great at advocating for themselves, but I think also, you know, the more people who aren't themselves deaf but who understand that these issues are important, I think that's you know, that's only going to be helpful to have more people who are, you know, hearing but who also care about representation and care about you know, being just and fair to people who just need a little accommodation.
All right. Now, last couple of questions. I know you teach at American University and George Mason right here in the city. Uh, and you've had this wonderful experience of going from short film to a feature-length film. Can you express to the community about involvement in films and how important it is to be representative of all communities?
I think DC, this area is an area where there's so much media being created, and that, you know, that there's a lot of video content being created, but it's not always people telling their original stories, being, you know, as creative as they can be. You know, there are a lot of jobs that are, you stay very busy doing content for the main industry of the town, you might say. But I just think there are so many bright people from all different walks of life, all different kinds of experiences and perspectives here in this area that, especially if you have some skills, whether it's
Yeah.
storytelling skills or filmmaking skills or editing, to really bring those and tell your story, not just, you know, what this lobbying group or this political party or whatever it is. That's all well and good for a day job, but get out there and tell your own creative stories. I think is really important.
Cool. Cool. Okay. So what's your next story? Next for Peter Kimball?
Well, you know, I'm pretty busy with teaching and with still going to festivals with the films that I have, but I am working on a new project that's sort of it's blurring the line between documentary and fiction, and it's still in the early stages now, but it's something I'd always thought of myself as a fiction filmmaker, and I made a couple short documentaries that sort of personal documentaries about my own family's experience, and I really thought the that documentary format is a really interesting kind of format for filmmaking, and that's something that I'm trying to now incorporate into a fiction film. So I'm working on a new feature that would be, I hesitate to call it a mockumentary because it's more of a dramatic film, not a comedy takeoff on a documentary, but more telling a fictional dramatic story in a documentary format.
Okay. All right. We'll look forward to. So, I know that's in the early stages, so I'm sure we'll see that in a year or two.
I think that's you know, I hope to be able to make it before this year is through. We're only in February now, but it'll probably be a little while after that before it's available to see.
All right. Last question before we get out of here. No, actually, I have two questions left. Are there any shout outs, any thank yous that you want to give right now to people who have helped you along the way, supported you, encouraged you, that you would like to give right now?
Well, you know, I just really look up to you know, Cynthia Fuchs at George Mason and Sarah Mankyfish at American University. Those are people who've been very good to me, helping me, but also I think are really important people in helping young or filmmakers of all ages, but film students really learn their craft and guide some departments in that. And I think that there's some really great students coming up that I'm really honored to be able to work with women like that. And those are the two names that come to mind, I guess.
Okay. And it's kind of like your acceptance speech where you have to think about who you have to, and after you finish, there's always somebody like, oh, I should have said, I should have. That's how it goes. You only get one
That's
shot
right.
at it. All right. You've already talked about the site where they can see your films. If somebody had a project or an idea that they wanted to share with you or get some ideas, can people how can someone get in contact with you, or can they get in contact with you to share ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with the production company Don't Matter Media, which is Don't Matter Media, all one word, no apostrophe. But so Peter at Don't Matter Media dot com. That'll get to me, or just check out don'tmattermedia.com. That's sort of the company's website. So some projects there, and that's the best way to reach out to me.
All right. Well, thank you for your time and congratulations again on being Filmmaker of the Month for the month of February. Uh, Congratulations.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me today.
All right. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.